February 4th, 2018, with a statement, and I hope that M is listening too. Dr. Stephen Greer, you have given a good portion of your life to finding what the facts are concerning ET contact and the many related connections and dynamics that this entire area of research encompasses. Folks, Dr. Greer's accomplishments include several books and a great many videos that are published. In 1990, Dr. Greer founded the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, SETI, to create a diplomatic and research-based initiative to contact extraterrestrial civilizations. In 1993, he founded the Disclosure Project, a not-for-profit research project whose goal is to disclose to the public the government's alleged knowledge of UFOs, extraterrestrial intelligence, and advanced energy and propulsion systems. The Disclosure Project was founded in an effort to grant amnesty to government whistleblowers. Beyond that, in 1997, he, along with other members of SETI, including Apollo astronauts Edgar Mitchell, made a presentation as a background briefing for members of Congress. In 1998, he retired from his position as an emergency room physician to devote more time to the Disclosure Project. Dr. Greer was chairman of the Department of Emergency Medicine at the Caldwell Emergency Hospital in North Carolina. In May 2001, he held a press conference at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. that featured 20 retired Air Force, Federal Aviation Administration, and intelligence officers. He gathered 120 hours of testimony from civilians and various government and military officials, including astronaut Gordon Cooper and a brigadier general on the topic of UFOs. He now has over 500 government, military, and intelligence community witnesses testifying to their direct, personal, firsthand experience with UFOs, ETs, ET technology, and the cover-up that keeps this information secret. 2008, he launched the non-for-profit research foundation called the Orion Project to develop new, out-of-the-box energy solutions. The Orion Project's goal is to bring together highly accomplished scientists, researchers, inventors, and thinkers who have expertise in advanced energy generation and propulsion technologies that will completely replace the need for oil, gas, coal, and nuclear power. That brings us to 2013. He co-produced Cyrus, a documentary detailing his work and hypothesis regarding extraterrestrial life and the government cover-ups. That brings us to 2017. He premiered his latest film, Unacknowledged, to expose the great secret of human history. No one has done more than you, Dr. Greer, to uncover the truth and to unlock the door so heavily guarded, and in an effort to reveal the various greedy and sinister individuals and powerful corrupt groups and organizations that have so forcefully held back vital, important information and advanced technology that could truly save our planet from the needless destruction of nature and resources that has been going on for such a long time. We all have been forced to rely on 80-year-old technology when the entire world could be benefiting from and enjoying from the major discoveries that would bring us all to profound, better lives today as well as for the generations to follow. You inspired us after your major talk here in New York City in 2001. I was a volunteer on that committee for publicizing that, to form this very grassroots organization, Disclosure Network New York. And we are now celebrating our 17th year of providing 2 program events each month throughout the year here in Manhattan. When we first formed our organization, we voted to adopt a slogan, which is, quote, connecting the dots to seek truth, unquote. Also, you and your staff have suffered over the years major individual attacks and loss of life. Please know that we admire your courage and your dedication. As co-founder and director of Disclosure Network New York, and on behalf of our membership, I want to thank you for your great service to humanity and wish you and your staff continued success. It is now my honor and privilege to welcome you, Dr. Stephen M. Greer.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it, and I appreciate that you've kept the torch of disclosure lit in New York. Great. Thank you so much.
It has been a wonderful experience for me, and we've learned so much from the people who've come here to lecture us and to show us videos, and also the personal experiences of some of the members of our group. It's just widened our perception so much about the realities of this world and what's really going on. And I can't think of anyone who's done more on that than you. So everything I said is so deserved, and just thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thanks to all the people there who supported our crowdfunding of Unacknowledged. You know, it was the #1 documentary in the entire world on iTunes and Netflix. And that's quite an accomplishment for an indie film that really had no advertising budget to speak of and just went viral. So right now there are approximately 100,000 people a day seeing Unacknowledged. So that's really getting the word out.
May I ask a couple of quick questions, and then you can certainly go wherever you want to.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm here to answer whatever you guys have.
Excellent. Just a couple of quick ones. How did you, a simple country doctor, as you have once termed yourself, able to meet high-level government people, and how were you able to gain deep knowledge to tell them the important information that they did not know themselves?
Well, that's a long story, but you know, when I started this project, it was really about a citizens diplomacy effort using advanced concepts and transdimensional physics and the science of consciousness to make contact with these civilizations. And of course, as soon as I emerged on the scene, we had very successful events happen, such as near Pensacola, Florida. You know, that video tape is not very good, but where the guy's going, holy damn hot shit, and these 4 ET craft materialize in the sky in front of us. Well, the thing is that put me on the radar scope of the intelligence community, which I was called the IC, right away, and the head of Army Intelligence reached out, initially threatened me, then offered me $2 billion if I would join his little cabal of sociopaths. I said, no, thank you. But I think what happened is that I kind of got diverted into the disclosure effort when I realized from friends of President Clinton who reached out to me that the president didn't have access or control over the projects, which I found quite unbelievable initially. And in fact, the letter that came from the director of the CIA's contact to me, who was head of a military think tank in Washington, stated that they wanted me to brief the Clinton administration and the CIA director in 1993 after the president took office, of course, in January of that year. And I because they were being denied access to the information and they knew they were being lied to. Well, frankly, to be honest with you, I did not believe that at the time. I felt this cannot be true. We cannot have a system that is this broken. But it turned out to be true. And so that was sort of my coming of age, where I realized that the unacknowledged, and at that time I didn't know what an unacknowledged special access project was. And luckily, I had some very good men from those projects reach out to me and who said, look, you know, we think you're on the side of the angels here. We want to help you. And they sort of became my people that I learned from about how that system works. So to be honest with you, when I first started out, I had a fair amount of evidence and information on the UFO subject, but I did not know, frankly, how the entire system was set up, who was running it, how it was run. And so that was a discovery process between 92 and, say, 97 or so for me, which, of course, culminated with the president not wanting to pursue this because he was afraid he'd be assassinated, and then subsequently the former CIA director, Bill Colby, who was going to hand off one of these zero-point energy, free energy systems to us, and around $50 million in sort of seed money to get it out to the public, was assassinated. I just had a man contact me 2 weeks ago who knew Bill Colby when he was CIA director, who confirmed that he was, in fact, assassinated trying to help us do this, but also that he named the person who ordered the assassination, which I won't go into here, but I know who this person is. I think that, that's when I learned that you're really going through the looking glass, and that these unacknowledged special access projects are, they're involving hundreds of billions of dollars per year, trillions of dollars in the aggregate, and that they run themselves as a kind of independent state. And they do not acknowledge their existence to anyone they don't wish to, and they are completely free of the oversight of the rule of law. This, of course, alarmed me tremendously, and so I began digging more and more and more, and over the period between 92 and 2001 came to identify several hundred of these military and intelligence operatives and corporate Lockheed Skunk Works folks. And it was an enormous amount of work, of course. But I think that what I'd like to correct you on is we now have over 900 of these sort of whistleblowers, and some of them we have recorded, some will not go on the record. But, for example, to give you an idea what my life is like, a few weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, a man reached out to me who was in these USAPs for a number of years, fairly recently, retired in 2012, who was in a system that was unacknowledged, dealing specifically with the reverse engineering of ET spacecraft and also their application of these technologies into offensive weapon systems, which have been placed hidden within radar systems as well as in space on satellites. And this man is highly credible. But what's interesting is that, every week or two, there's a new sort of deep throat, as it was called in the Watergate era, who reaches out to me. I think they do that for a couple reasons. First, they know that we're the chief movement in the world doing this. And then secondly, they trust me. And as a medical doctor, they know that can tell me information, and I will keep their identities confidential if that's what they request, and I have never violated that. So I think that for that reason, it really has helped being a medical doctor in a strange way, because people will entrust you with information they will not provide anyone else. And I think the other part of it is that once I was able to do a comprehensive assessment of this and do the analysis, so it's both collecting of evidence, but you also have to do the analysis. And in a sense, I'm an intelligence analyst now that analyzes, hundreds of different points of information and create a mosaic of understanding of what's going on at this base, what's going on in this division. For example, there's a technology management office in the sub-basement of the Pentagon that this recent man was assigned to, where they were running unacknowledged special access projects, which are super black projects, dealing with this. And, so it goes on, and over time, you just collect this information and create a picture. And I think that one of the problems in this whole field is that people will take anything that somebody hears third hand and say that's what's going on. And I require first-hand people. And I require them to also have information that I can then corroborate with other independent sources they don't know before I speak about it. So I think that, we have a standard that even if some of what we put out there just seems completely unbelievable, it's all accurate and it's all true. And so once, and it sort of is a positive feedback loop, because once people who are on the inside see what I'm doing and saying, they know I know what I'm talking about. And then they reach out to me, and more of them reach out to me, if that makes any sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and
that's how you build this. It's very painstaking. It's been 28 years of work to do it, but that's really how you do it. It's not something that happens overnight. It unfolded organically, and of course, here we are.
No, absolutely true. And trust is everything. I want to just step back for a second. We had a couple of quick questions from our group. One of them was, do you remember, if you could share with us, the first time that you felt as though, this is an area that I need to know about? Were you a child, or I read something, but I can't quite remember. Did you see a UFO when you were a kid, something like that?
Yes. I mean, if you read sort of an autobiographical book I wrote, it's called Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge. You can get it at our website, SiriusDisclosure.com, SIRIUS Disclosure.com. It kind of goes through that, but I had a sighting when I was a little boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, and I was with some kids in the neighborhood, and my sister, who remembers this to this day, daytime, seamless, sort of disc-shaped object. I guess it was about 1963, 64, that period. And, I just went, wow, this is really amazing. These are real. But my parents thought we were just kids. But then, when I was 17, I had a near-death experience. I got very sick and almost died, and had this beautiful cosmic consciousness experience. And so a few months later, learned meditation and started going into deep and higher states of consciousness. And I was up in the mountains of North Carolina that fall when I turned 18 at college, and was meditating up in the wilderness at sunset, and I saw another one, and the same craft I'd seen when I was 8 or 9 appeared, and I just thought, oh, well, that's cool, they're back. And then I went into deep meditation afterwards. I had a full-on contact experience with an ET, and I then had an experience for several hours on an ET craft where we co-created the CE5 protocols, the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind protocols. And so that's when I really started looking into it more, but didn't know what to do with it as an 18-year-old. So it's a very kind of long story of how it unfolded until I was, working as an emergency trauma doctor, and some more things happened, and I found this path. But even when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, I collected every book and magazine I could on this and was just reading about it. I was fascinated that they were out there. It was just, I was almost, as a kid, obsessed with this. And so, I had a deep interest in it from a very young age.
Right. I think we all can share that. Another quick question, please. Did ETs really fly over Washington, D.C. in 1952? We've seen that very famous photograph. Do you have any feelings on that?
Oh, yeah. I know guys, in fact, I know a couple of guys, they passed away now, who were pilots, and one was a radar operator who was there at the time it happened. And yes, that was a legitimate event. It was around the time we detonated the first hydrogen bomb. And you have to understand the connection between the modern UFO phenomenon and the ET's concern about our atomic and nuclear weapons, and that this was viewed as a crossing a red line of destructiveness of a civilization that could be an existential threat to not only this world but potentially to other worlds. And the energy that's released during those detonations also have transdimensional or interdimensional effects that are highly disruptive, non-locally, sort of entanglement theory, if you know that in quantum physics, where it's beyond the speed of light, beyond space-time limitations. When you start dealing with non-locality in physics, because in fact, every point in space and time is connected to every other point in space and time through deeper levels of increasingly subtle energy, but also conscious fields of energy. And, some of these weapon systems are crossing, they're not just in 3D, and that's one of the problems. This gets into a very arcane discussion of the cosmology and how the universe is kind of constructed, if you will, the architecture. But certainly these interstellar civilizations have a deep and abiding concern about the direction that we have taken, where we diverted off what should have been a peaceful evolutionary course, where we would have had a peaceful world and had free energy technologies out, starting almost 100 years ago, and have gone down this very destructive path, not just in terms of how we live on the planet with our energy systems and propulsion systems, but also our tendency to continue to use very advanced sciences and weaponize them into systems that could be affect not only this planet, but could at some point, and perhaps already are, disruptive to other places in the cosmos. So I think that you don't see, it's not a coincidence. The whole Roswell event, which has been badly misunderstood, was primarily because we had the only atomic bomb squadron in the world sitting there at the 508th Bomber Squadron in Roswell, New Mexico. And those spacecraft, the three of them that crashed, and we have had it confirmed from Air Force intelligence, it was three. Those didn't just drop out of the sky because they didn't know how to maneuver in New Mexico. Those were hit by a quote-unquote special radar system. There's a memo from Guy Hotel, who was a field officer to J. Edgar Hoover, about this. It's in the book. And by the way, you should get the book Unacknowledged. It has about 5 or 10 times more information than the movie Unacknowledged. But in this memo, it says, well, they had a new, quote, radar system. So interestingly, I was just contacted by this deep source inside who had been in the technology management office in the sub-basement of the Pentagon, who stated that, in fact, that's a euphemism for very advanced electromagnetic weapon systems that can basically cause particularly electronically dependent spacecraft or aircraft to drop out of the sky. In fact, he personally had seen it used in the Iraq War, and that a number of the Saddam Hussein's planes that did get airborne were just knocked out of the sky, not by our fighter jets, but by this quote-unquote radar system, which is not radar at all. So I think that, this sort of thing is the reason why the situation is so fraught is that we have a bunch of sociopaths who view the universe only for military spectacles and what have you, dealing with interstellar civilization in a aggressive and militarized way. And this is very, very dangerous and ill-advised. And I think that that's one of the things that has to be resolved through not only disclosure, but getting wiser and calmer heads involved in the relationship between humans and these other civilizations.
Absolutely agreed on that. I just wanted to take that to another level there. Is there, do you know, some sort of a agreement that another civilization shouldn't interfere with an evolving planet? But the stipulation would be unless something like you described, that they're going towards some destructive ends, and so therefore they would stop, ETs could stop something like that from happening on a particular planet. Is there some kind of a directive? Do you know?
Well, yes. I mean, it's people joke, call it the prime directive, but
Okay.
it's more nuanced. It's much more nuanced than that. For example, they're obviously involved in their monitoring, and they have done things to demonstrate. For example, at the Minot, North Dakota Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Facility, Strategic Air Command Facility, back in the early 80s, when there was an ET craft that came into that area and took about 18 to 20 intercontinental ballistic missiles, nuclear missiles, offline, rendered them unlaunchable for a period of time. They were demonstrating that what they were saying. One of the captains, the Air Force captains who was there, said to me, what he felt was happening is that the ETs were saying, please don't destroy this beautiful planet. But if you do a full-on launch with mutual assured destruction, we could intervene and prevent it and stop it. Now, I don't think they would do it on a limited basis. They did not stop Hiroshima or Nagasaki. They did not stop World War II. However, we're now at a point with thousands of these weapons where all life on Earth could be extinguished. There's another prevailing concern, and that is we have placed much more advanced weapons than nuclear weapons on satellites in space that obliterate any object that approaches the Earth, but also can project that kind of energy field out into space. What that means is that we have become an existential threat to them. And so I think that this is something that certainly the main people in the National Military Command Center and many of the top, I have briefed personally the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, 3-star general, and the head of Intelligence Joint Staff, members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, on and on. None of these people know this is going on because that's the nature of an unacknowledged special access project. It's not being overseen by most of the people you would assume would know about it, which makes them incredibly dangerous but incredibly powerful and lethal. And so in this milieu, you're faced with an out-of-control military-industrial intelligence complex that is off the radar of most of the people in government, and yet you have civilizations who have a prevailing interest in preserving peace in space, and I believe have a long-term interest in seeing that the Earth can continue on as a womb for the evolution and development of intelligent life and species. So it's complex interplay of interest and agendas, none of which the UFO community has a clue about, quite frankly. And, most of what passes as research in this field is rubbish. I'm not proud to say so, but it's true. And mainly because people just they lack sources, they lack methods, they lack firsthand knowledge, and then they jump to wild, unwarranted conclusions. So I think that what you're really dealing with these civilizations is they're waiting for us to grow up and become, as Michikaku would call it, the level 1 civilization, meaning we are no longer a war-faring people. We've made peace on our planet and in space, and we're no longer damaging the environment with our technologies. Now, that's all doable, but we haven't reached it yet. And until we do, people have fantasies about mass open contact, and that would be 10 hours of development as a civilization. That's actually a civilization. Right now, we're a chaotic, dysfunctional, destructive species that's destroying our own planet and still warring with each other with thousands of nuclear weapons pointed at each other. This is not an acceptable situation at all. So I think that we also have to understand that the nation see that we have the potential to become, enlightened and peaceful and go out into space like that, because most humans are not sociopaths or psychopaths, like the cabal that runs all this. However, until we, the people, stand up and seize the reins of the direction of this instead of being sheeple, then, you know, the center of power, unfortunately, remains with these sociopaths. And I think that's where each individual is responsible for the planet, instead of looking to, well, what's the president going to do, or what's Dr. Greer going to do? It's everyone's responsibility to come together and resolve these problems. And I think that's a message of empowerment people should take to heart. That the ETs themselves are happy to interface with us in limited ways, in very nuanced ways until then, because they know we have the potential to get to that point. Now, would there be a massive intervention if there was a worst case scenario, say mutual assured destruction, MAD, which is the policy of everyone's shooting off all their nuclear weapons at once, or if we destroy the biosphere so badly that there's a polar shift, or there's a mass collapse of both ice caps and most of the coastal areas of the planet are inundated, which is where we're headed. But yes, I think at that point there could be some massive intervention. But those are only in worst-case scenarios. Under worst-case scenarios, where you're facing the loss of, you know, anywhere from 3 to 6 billion people, there might be that kind of intervention. And until then, they're expecting us to take responsibility for our home planet and muster our own faculties and work together to resolve the issue, all the while watching what we're doing, trying to understand what things are, making their own preparations for Plan B, C, D, and E, which we don't have time to go into, and also selectively interfacing with humans so that there's a foundation for a relationship under any scenario, whether we make it through this chaotic period intact, or whether we go into catastrophic problems. Unfortunately, we're headed right now towards increasingly catastrophic problems, and so I think that it's very important that the public understand how this is being viewed cosmically and what the strategic concerns are. The biggest of which, of course, is this most recent fake disclosure initiative coming out of the black world to the Stars Academy, where you have a bunch of folks who have been given mainstream media coverage for one gun camera footage case that appeared in December 16th, and have then piggybacked the alien threat hoax on the coattails of that. And of course, I predicted this would happen. I knew it was going to happen. If you read my paper, When Disclosure Serves Secrecy, which I wrote in 1999, that's 19 years ago, you will see that I predict exactly what has just begun to unfold. And the reason for that, of course, Carol Rosin, who is the Werner von Braun spokeswoman, stated it quite clearly, is that after they've been done with the Cold War and manufacturing the conditions for endless terrorism and nations of concern and things like 9/11, they're going to pull the ultimate trump card, no pun intended, which is a hoaxed alien threat. And we're right there. We're exactly there right now. And so those who are concerned with disclosure have to be concerned with the truthful disclosure, and not one that's been spun in the direction of the aliens are coming, go run for cover, which is, of course, what, unfortunately, someone that I mentored for years, Tom DeLong of Blink-182, and a lot of the folks he's working with, I know a number of the people on his team, are throwing their weight behind. But that, it's interesting. I have a really highly placed source at the CIA who wrote me recently and said, that rat pack is what he calls them. The rat pack has been running scams on the U.S. government, clueless billionaires, referring to Robert Bigelow, who I also know, and the public for decades. He says, and that's all that is. And he's highly placed. He's an all-access pass majority Intelligence Committee member, magic member. who's incredibly supportive of disclosure happening in a way that doesn't result in these catastrophes. But at the same time, we're certainly, the mainstream media is on the payroll of the intelligence community, and they will only cover things when they're told to and spun in the correct direction of it being a threat. And this is something that anyone who's concerned with the future of the planet should be very alarmed by. Superficially, anyone just looking at it, say, oh, wow, there's a pilot that came out with this gun camera case. But then right behind it is all the xenophobia and disinformation. So, for example, the Lockheed Skunk Works guy saying, well, we're trying to collect some material from these UFOs, but we really don't know how they work. And meanwhile, my sources who have been in the system have documented that we mastered gravity control and had reverse engineered these systems by October of 1954. So that man is either ill-informed or he's telling a bold-faced cover story lie. Either way, he should not be in front of the media because he's either an ignoramus or he's a liar and a disinformation agent. You can choose, you can believe what you want. I don't know what's in this man's heart, but I can tell you that it's completely false. So, we have a handwritten letter from the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, Ben Rich, where he acknowledges that we have both ET and man-made UFOs. And it's in his penmanship to one of his best friends. And when that friend passed away, his wife gave it to one of my associate researchers, Michael Schratt. So I think that people need to wake up and realize that if you see it on the New York Times, CNN, the Washington Post, and elsewhere, there's a 99.999% chance that it's some evidence that's being coded and has coattails that are pulling in this disinformation, and that's how the intelligence community works. Unfortunately, the public doesn't understand the methods and strategies of the intelligence community and are usually sitting ducks. Look at what happened after 9/11, where Cheney and his henchmen made up this myth that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and we stampede into Iraq, and of course he didn't have any, and everybody knew he didn't have any. So that we could break up the biggest oil field in the world outside Saudi Arabia and send the price of oil up to $150 a barrel. And people say, oh, we went in there to get the oil. I said, like hell we did. We went in there to break the system so that it would be artificially scarce, so the price of oil would go up fivefold from $30-some a barrel to $150. And this integrates trillions of dollars in petrodollar revenue. So I think that people need to understand what the long game is here and how vulnerable the public is. Because, as you have seen in the movie Unacknowledged, we have both an Air Force intelligence officer and a constitutional attorney, Sheehan, who was involved with the Pentagon papers for the New York Times, who confirmed that there are many, many people at the national level of the media who are on the payroll of the intelligence community. In fact, Sheehan said he saw a document where there are 42 senior editors and national security correspondents, et cetera, around the world that were covertly on the payroll of the CIA. And our Air Force officer said, oh, yeah, we would carry bags of cash to national and local and regional media to secure their cooperation with any story they had. So this kind of corruption of the fourth estate is not known by the public. We, the disclosure movement, need to understand it. And when you see something breaking through, you have to say, wow, how? Okay, and here's a good example. How is it that you have the number one documentary on Earth, Unacknowledged? It's such a huge phenomenon. Never get covered by the mainstream media, but you have a group of hand-picked people from the deep intelligence community and USAPs coming out with one bit of evidence that's a fraction of what we have, and it's in every mainstream media. Why is that? Is it based on the evidence? No, it's based on the fact that the meta-message, the deeper message of the To the Stars Academy is there's an alien threat out there we need to fight. They want to weaponize space. They want the next war to be interplanetary, just like General Douglas MacArthur said in 1956 or 4. Right? He said World War III will be interplanetary. So you have people who are itching for the expansion of the multi-trillion-dollar military intelligence laboratory financial complex into a globally supported system, not just fighting fellow humans, but fighting other civilizations in space. This is what Werner von Braun was most distraught about on his deathbed. And I have had many, many, many different people from walks of life, dating from the 50s until quite recently, who were in these commands and up to 2012, tell me the exact same story of what's going on. And so we ignore this at our peril, but we also can't be sort of naive dupes of just lapping up any kind of rubbish that's put out there by people who are either wittingly or unwittingly shills carrying the weight for the intelligence community. Because the intelligence community at this level never does anything directly. They always do something through a cutout, a group or an entity or a person, whether they know it or not, who's doing it on their behalf. And it isn't hard to figure it out once you see what the deeper agenda is. But as soon as the agenda starts moving in the direction of the next phase in war, then you know that the warmongers and war profiteers and the sociopaths are behind it.
Boy, that's for sure. Truer words were never spoken. The concerns here certainly are what you're talking about, and also chemtrails, which is, we've had a couple of meetings on that whole subject. We've tried to contact the mayor of New York and the health department. We have photographs, obviously, proving what's going on in the skies. We developed a website, lookupnow.info, which is to educate people on the whole subject of chemtrails. We are under attack health-wise, and that's a worldwide, as you know, it's a worldwide effort to thin the population. In addition to other things like fluoride in the water, it goes on. And I think the general feeling from the meetings was that we are under attack, and very few people understand how bad it is. You've already outlined some of those points, and it's
yes. But I will tell you that that whole issue, A, hasn't been understood well, and B, if I were to list in rank order from 1 to 10, 10 being the most severe threat we're facing, the chemtrail and all of that would be a -2. I hate to tell you, but from where I sit, I'm about to say it's insignificant, but it's insignificant compared to other dynamics that are occurring. The other thing to understand is that some of what have been called chemtrails are contrails that are just from jets, but the ones that have been chemtrails are actually a misguided program. So to give you an idea how bad the government has become, there are people in the government trying to slow down the rate of the collapse of the northern and southern hemisphere ice cap. And they are putting stuff in these exhaust fumes, which are toxic to humans, yes. But their intent, one of their purposes, is to try to reflect light back out with aluminum and other compounds that would replace the reflectivity of the loss in ice volume and ice coverage, which reflects infrared back out into space. Of course, it's a ridiculous and jimmy-rigged system, which is toxic as hell. But it goes to show the kind of folly that we engage in with one problem. The dam is bursting, and they're trying to put a Band-Aid on it here and there. The bigger issue is that we're about 100 years into an era when we should not have been using coal or gas or oil or nuclear power. But everyone from Tesla on had their technology suppressed, and the Tesla car is not a Tesla; it's a Musk. It's an Elon car. Elon Musk knows damn good and well, for example, that the zero-point energy systems exist, that he doesn't want to take on the national security apparatus to bring it out. But so you're plugging your Tesla car or your Bolt or whatever it is into a coal-fired power grid or a nuclear power grid. The fundamental problem is that you're going to have to accept the fact that we're going to have to, our addicted oil economy and centralized energy system needs to be completely replaced. But to do that is hundreds of trillions of dollars in revenue and infrastructure that is obsolete. And that no one wants to take on. So they keep doing these little Band-Aid approaches. And the Band-Aid approaches are too little, too late, and it really becoming a serious crisis on the planet, not just environmentally, but also geopolitically and in many other ways. So, a great many of the conflicts around the world are based on territory, oil wars, the Middle East. We don't care about the Middle East except that there's oil there. I mean, why we were concerned about that, for the date palms and goats? I don't think so. I think this is all of our public policy and even the alternative energy research that's going on is all sort of a Truman show. If you ever saw the movie with Jim Carrey, where it's just sort of a theater. It's like my friends in the intelligence community called the PSA security theater. It's just to get the appearance of security. But most of the environmental things that are being advanced, such as solar and wind and geothermal, that's just theatrical. They know it's not going to be a solution for 7.5 billion people. But the solution they feel is worse than the disease because it would so disrupt the status quo. I mean, all of your, sociopaths on Wall Street up there in New York would be out of a job very quickly. And I think that, all the commodity trading, the biggest commodity in the world that's traded today is still oil. That will be unnecessary, and it would be unnecessary very, very quickly within a generation. So I think that, we have been kicking the can down the road for 100 years, and now we're at this, crisis. And it's only going to deepen until we accept the fact that we have to grow up as adults, as a civilization, and say we need to make the changes that we've been putting off for 100 years, and move on. But that's a very difficult thing to do because of the special interest and the corrupting influence of these sort of powerful plutocrats and kleptocrats and what I call them petro-Nazis and what have you, that really have more power than the Congress or the White House has. I mean, you look at a global economy of tens of trillions of dollars, and the discretionary budget of the United States is some fraction of that. And that economy, the macroeconomic system, is completely run by people who are centered in the petrodollar energy sector world. And I think this becomes, the question is that we have to find people who understand strategically and macroeconomically and in many other ways what the priorities are. And I'm not saying chemtrails or pollution in our water and pollution in the air isn't important, but as an emergency doctor, the first thing you do when you have 40 people come in who have just been in a head-on collision with a bus and a truck, you triage them. So we're going to triage this situation, and you only have a certain amount of time in the day. Let's get focused on what the real issues are.
Are there people out there in the public eye that you feel as though we should actively support because of what you're saying, the ideas you have? Besides you and your organization, are there others that you feel are champions of this search for truth? And is there anybody or any group that you could recommend us to support?
Well, I mean, if they're in the book and in the movie, those are people I would say are credible and should be supported. I don't really involve myself with the politics of ufology. I'm not interested in it. Okay. And to be honest with you, that's not my target. My target is there's 7.5 billion people on the planet and a couple hundred countries, and people get into the bubble and the echo chamber of, sort of the conspiracy and UFO subculture. And frankly, there are people who do good work in that area, such as Michael Schratt, who's collected the best archive in the world on the covert black projects in the aerospace industry. I really love the work of, there are a number of people who are doing very, very good work out there. They're not necessarily the ones on, tabloid outlets like Gaia TV that feature mostly fantasy-prone rubbish. But I think that, as you know, I don't tend to parse my words. I just pretty much say what it is. But there are wonderful people out there. Paula Harris has done an enormous amount of work collecting an archive of evidence. You go to Latin America, there are tremendous researchers who've collected evidence throughout Latin America that's positive, some from military sources, some from people who've had contact. I would say, the best research is being done in a lot of those areas in other countries that isn't as steeped in the sort of superstition and this disinformation of America. One of the things you have to understand is America is the biggest economy in the world, the biggest military in the world, by far the biggest black budget in the world, and therefore the inhabitants of America are the target of the most disinformation in the world. And I think that, that makes logical sense, and most people don't think about that. And so, I have contacts in Russia who are following generals and intelligence people and scientists who are closely following what we're doing and who have themselves put together research and institutes. Now, you would never hear about them in America, but, I think this is where, there's only so much. Frankly, you mentioned my staff. Keep in mind, we don't have a staff. We have volunteers. My wife and I do this out of a room in our house. We have no budget. We have no funding support. We don't even have a secretary. So, there's a limited amount you can do without somebody providing funding for it. And, you really, at this point, if it was funded properly, yes, there'd be a whole team of associate researchers, and we have those that we tap and rely on who are doing great work in different places in the world. We have a great team in Japan, for example, but I think that ultimately, most of the time, the oxygen is kind of sucked up out of the room by people, who claim they were just raped by an alien and have a baby floating in an incubator out by Venus or some nonsense. And I think, unfortunately, that sort of that kind of rubbish passes as research, and people like to be entertained with shock and awe and drivel. And I tend to be a little, maybe too much of an intellectual, but I think that we have to begin to have some discernment and, get focused on what the critical issues are. What I tried to do with the disclosure book and then this last book, Unacknowledged, and the documentary, is to put together the analysis and the evidence and the documents so that any layperson, anyone in your audience right there, could give that to someone and say, look at this, you'll get a great idea of what's going on. Because, most people aren't going to spend 100 hours going through my archive or 1,000 hours. So what I'm trying to do is distill it into what the central information is about, and provide enough evidence and documents and sources so people can then jump off from there. Unfortunately, what normally happens, and I'll just say this, my biggest disappointment over the last 25 years is that people will find out about this issue, then they get on the internet, and there's this gigantic, big black hole of disinformation sitting out there that they get sucked into. Yep. And that's an ongoing and worsening problem, because it's titillating material, it's sensationalistic, and so very rational people that I've introduced to this subject then get diverted onto the superhighway of disinformation. And frankly, I don't really know how to do that. It's everyone is responsible for their own discernment, and people can believe what they want. But to me, it's been the greatest source of sort of angst and disappointment is the lack of discernment and the gullibility of people to fall into the disinformation black hole. And keep in mind that for every bit of information out there on this issue, there's probably 10 or 100 points of disinformation that have been populated into what's sitting available to people to Google, and it's been done very, very deliberately. Even if the person who is putting it out there is only a vector and is an unwitting participant, they have been targeted with it. And this is what you see happening with this To the Stars Academy. There's a mixture of fact and disinformation being rolled together in a palatable package so that they're hoping the media, the public will swallow it. And they tend to work, just as it worked after 9/11 with the Iraq War. And I think this is where critical thinking and analysis, discernment, is so important, and it's sort of gone the way of all flesh as people rely on 142 characters in a tweet to get their information, or something similar. So I know I sound like an old-fashioned curmudgeon here, but at a certain point, you do have to sort of study and have discernment and go more deeply into these issues in a way, and always have a big part of your mind going, well, is this real, or is it something that's disinformation masquerading as real, or is it partially true, and has it had attached to it a lot of disinformation for its psychological warfare value? I'm quoting from a CIA document where Walter Bedell Smith, CIA director in 1953, in a memo summarized, and we have not got the attachment, but it talks about the psychological warfare value of the UFO subject. And I think that this disinformation and psychological warfare value of it is so key. I was shocked in the 90s when I came across operatives who had been on abduction squads, who were military guys, who were on anti-gravity craft made by our aerospace giants, who were abducting people made to look like aliens. Same thing with the mutilations. And I have met with multiple people who've been in those unacknowledged ops that are psychological warfare operations. And, of course, we have an Air Force intelligence officer who, when I pushed him on it, confirmed that, yes, that's what's going on, and admitted there was a false flag operation going on. So you can't take all this stuff that's out there at face value. You need to be able to anchor it to what's actually going on. People say, well, why should we take your word over anyone else's? I said, well, you don't. I mean, you can go and check it yourself. But I try to put out the true information to the best I can find it, and it's sourced, and I have hundreds and hundreds of sources to confirm it. But I also have the ability to sort of look behind the curtain and say, where did this actually originate, and what was the originating stimulus? Dr. John Altshuler, who is a friend of mine, who is a very renowned medical doctor, hematologist, pathologist in Denver, was the original investigator on all the mutilations out west, Snippy the horse and all this. That was his work. Now, there are charlatans who are journalists and whatnot, like Linda Moulton Howe, who then took his work and said, an alien harvest, the aliens are coming and vivisecting our poor animals and blah, blah, blah. Well, he knew all along that it was a covert paramilitary operation and had a proof of it. So I was at his home and we were talking about this. Of course, Dr. Altshuler was just kind of run over by the UFO and PR and mainstream media machine, because the mainstream media machine wanted to use that as something to scare the hell out of people about how horrible the aliens are. Meanwhile, the only scientist who was ever really involved is there with the evidence that, of course, this was being done as quote-unquote stagecraft by paramilitary and unacknowledged special access projects for a number of reasons, getting raw material for biological experiments and then doing it in a way that would make people think that there was a UFO or alien component to it when it was not. And then I ran across a rancher in northern New Mexico who had 250,000 acres, and he had enough money that he staked out where a lot of his cattle were being mutilated, and in fact he saw that they were these strange anti-gravity craft and silent helicopters, and he tried to sue the U.S. government. The U.S. government denied any knowledge of it because the mainstream government doesn't know anything about it. It's being done by a parallel, unacknowledged special access project. So I go to the source and go into a deep research. Meanwhile, the sort of ephemera of hysteria that's out there on the UFO subject passes as research and evidence, and it isn't. Yes, there are mutilations. Yes, there are abductions. Yes, there's all kinds of scary stuff going on. But who the hell's doing it? Now, one of the big problems with this, and I'll say this to your audience, you cannot analyze what's going on with this phenomenon until you fully understand what the covert human capabilities are. Let me repeat that. Unless you know what the covert human capabilities are, you will easily be deceived that something is extraterrestrial when it's actually deep military advanced technology. And I think this is one of the central problems with the whole UFO and disclosure movement, is that they have not taken the time to study what are the electronic warfare systems available, what are the methods and technologies that can be deployed by these unacknowledged special access projects to simulate an alien event, et cetera, and so on and so forth. So unless you get your mind around that, there's no way for you to take just the evidence of a case and know whether it was ET or whether it was a false flag, a psychological warfare, or a decoy situation created by the intelligence community. I think this is something most people can't believe. When I say, look, there are people I have gotten to know over the years who were involved in this issue, and some have passed away, some are very old, in the 50s and 60s, who described technologies that every single person listening in your room today would think came right out of a Star Trek or Star Wars episode, and they were human. And so I think that, and one of the things that New Witness emphasized, who had been in the technology management office and had baseline access across 16 different unacknowledged special access projects, he said that the public had any a 1% idea of what the human technologies are and what they're capable of, they would absolutely pass out, fall out of their chair. So I think until you kind of drill down deep on that, you have to be very careful at kind of superficially saying, this event happened, it was alien. No, you can't do that. This event happened, yes, here's the evidence for it. Was it man-made? Was it ET? Or was it man-made using an ET object? For example, the principal investigator on the Cash Landrum case, which most of your people must know about, and where all those poor women and people got irradiated outside Houston in the early 80s, there was a UFO that was being escorted by helicopters that was crash landing. It had a malfunction. Well, what people don't understand, but this is in the book, Unacknowledged, and you should get it and read it very carefully, is that this was a test flight of an ET craft that they couldn't get to work properly for its propulsion system, energy system, I should say, and they put in a nuclear power source to run the energy system on it, and they were test flying it like humans. It left the Nellis, so-called Area 51 area, malfunctioned outside Houston, and started to crash land, spewing all this nuclear radiation. Now look up the Cash Landrum case. The U.S. government denied it happened. those people who had seen helicopters escorting this craft, now the craft itself was actually ET that was being repurposed and experimented on. So these are very complex issues. Now, luckily, I got this Air Force intelligence officer to go on the record, and he was involved in the UFO issue for about almost a decade, and specifically dealt with that case as the principal investigator, and he debriefed the pilots, the 4 human pilots on this ET craft. Now, this sounds like science fiction, but what I'm telling you is 100% the truth. Now, see, there are so many cases like that. So it's like the old commercial, is it real or is it Memorex? Or is it some combination of the two? Mm-hmm. Is it an ET object being used by humans, either experimentally or otherwise, where something may have gone badly wrong and they have to create a cover story? For example, he also gives the example of people being abducted up in the Pacific Northwest who unfortunately saw the test flying of one of our experimental anti-gravity craft, and in order to create a cover story in their minds, those people were subsequently targeted with a home invasion and were abducted, made to look alien, so that they would think that all of this was ET. Was 100% of what they experienced in their home invasion, as well as what they saw, unfortunately, in the wee hours of the night near this military base, was man-made. But to a superficial, uninformed UFO researcher, oh my God, these people had a UFO sighting, and then later whenever they were abducted by evil aliens. Well, nothing of the sort happened. So you have to be able to go more deeply. And one of the problems is that we don't have people who are interested in the truth. They're interested in advancing their belief system. And one of the problems with human nature is that everyone wants to have someone new to hate. In other words, we're people who have descended from, we're 98% chimpanzees in terms of our genetic makeup. And those monkeys organize into troops who fight and engage in war together. Now, humans have this sort of original sin of wanting to hate anything that's in a tribe different from us. It looks different or acts different or believes different. So we will fight over religious belief or economic ism, this ism, that ism, the other ism, racism, homophobia. We'll just find something that someone is different from us, and then we have to hate them and then kill them. Well, the ultimate thing that the intelligence community is trying to do is to exploit that flaw in human nature on a cosmic level. They're playing us like a fiddle, and they know that humans have this proclivity to go to their lower base emotions of fear and hatred and paranoia, and then take that from the next step to warfare. And this is how those people who are demagogues manipulate the masses and keep the fire burning of conflict. So they want to set one group up against another. And this is the sort of tribalism, the dark side of tribalism. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being identified with your ethnic or religious or background, but ultimately people need to transcend that and even transcend their humanity into understanding that there is a component of all of us that is cosmic, universal consciousness that's the foundation of our relationship. And then all the other things are sort of secondary to that. But unfortunately, humans tend to easily get sidetracked into things where they can feel superior over another group or hate another group. And this is what they are using the UFO subculture for, is sort of a conditioning of their psychology to accept the cost in blood and treasure of an interplanetary war. And not that it would play out the way they really would be us fighting with each other with staged ET craft, but one of the things that people need to understand is that the organizing power of warfare in society goes back thousands of years. And the people who know how to organize cultures around conflict, these kind of demagogues, We're very good at it. It's like if you read the story of how the colonial power in New Zealand would set one native tribe up against another so that they would kill each other. It's a way of manipulating subcultures. And they're trying to now manipulate the entire human race against other interstellar civilizations. It's a very nasty, dangerous game that we need to wake up from and not believe and begin to question everything about this issue. And I find that people are way too gullible and not discerning, and I think we have to have childhood to end here and move on to a more adult understanding of all of these issues.
Well, all your points are well taken, and I rest assured that this group here in New York City really understands and gets what you're saying, and we dig deep. We have wonderful researchers in the group, and believe me, we are very much on to what you're saying. I can't believe...
Yeah, I just wanted to say it for the record and give you some examples of where it's, where people go wrong, and also where you have to be eternally vigilant for the disinformation. I've had so many people approach me about this latest tranche of stuff that's been in the media on the UFO issue, and they've been completely taken in by what the agenda is behind the group doing it. I said, well, I know a lot of the members of that group and have known them for 20 years. And I think that, we know exactly what that agenda is. And unfortunately, of course, the mainstream public is very vulnerable because we're at an enormous disadvantage when you have the major corporate media outlets that are really on the payroll and are being controlled by the financial and intelligence community complex that wants to get a certain agenda pushed forward. So, there's no question that we're the vast underdogs here, and that's okay. That's the way all change happens. Change never happens from the centers of power. It happens from outside the centers of power, and I'm very much outside. But I have access, and so, that's why when someone asked me, will you put together a briefing for President Trump? When he got nominated, I said, well, yeah, I will. And so we did, and it was given to him. And now whether or not, he reads any of it, or whether or not it's acted on, I'm not holding my breath. And, Billy Bob Clinton and Obama and W was controlled by Cheney, who's a member of the Majority Intelligence Committee, or Trump will make any headway. I wouldn't hold my breath. And my biggest concern, by the way, in terms of any president, is that they get Reaganed. And what I mean by getting Reaganed, there's a colonel who was in the Air Force who approached me a few years ago, who was on the committee selling Star Wars, SDI, to the late term of Carter and the early term of Reagan. He says, yes, one of the things we tried to convince them of is the alien threat, and of course we all privately would laugh and know that there was no such thing. But of course Reagan, being a sort of a B-rated actor and not exactly a giant intellectual, was taken in by this hook, line, and sinker, which is of course why he's at the UN. You see it in the movie saying, wow, wouldn't our job of creating world unity and peace be easier if we had a common alien threat that we could unite against, and blah, blah. So, this is this siren song of fear, and the only way we can bring humanity together is to fight someone new. It's an incredibly backward and retrograde perspective, but it's very easy to manipulate a president who knows nothing about the intelligence community. Reagan had been a governor of California, so what? In case of Trump, you have a real estate developer from your hometown who knows nothing about this whole area of concern, and he's probably surrounded by people who are operatives from the unacknowledged special access world, and he doesn't know it. So all I can do is give advice and provide answers when the questions come up to me. And I do this in a nonpartisan way, and I do this in a non-geopolitical way. I don't care if they're from Russia or Japan or the royal families of Europe or whoever who approach me. I give them what I know to be the facts and what the truth is. But saying this, I'm fully cognizant of the fact that people who are in the bubble of the Congress or the presidency or any country are very vulnerable to those around them they rely on for their national security assessments and information, as opposed to a country doctor in Virginia who's doing this as a ad hoc effort. I mean, and so I'm not grandiose about this. I mean, I realize not that it's what we're doing is of no significance, but we're up against a machine, a war machine, and a multi-$100 trillion macroeconomic machine that wants to get its way, which is why I always say what you're doing and what others like you are doing is so important to get the word and the truth and the information out person to person to person, because that's really how you make change happen. And it very rarely, change of this magnitude almost never comes from the top. This is why they're called a revolution. Now, it doesn't have to be a bloody revolution. It can be a peaceful revolution. But these sort of revolutionary, transformative changes in society, going back as far in history as you want to look, have almost never, ever come from the leaders and from the power centers. It's come from outside that, which is what we are. And I'm not ashamed to say that that's what we are. And I have no interest in, being the president or anything else. I mean, I'd be the worst person to run for political office ever. I'm so blunt. You can't be too honest and be president. You can be pretty stupid and be president, but you can't be. Ouch. But I know I'm an outrageous person, but we ought to have a Sirius XM channel where I just rant. Anyone who knows me well, they go, "Oof, man, it is a cold barrel." But I think we're really at a point in our society where the action has to be like 100,000 people a day are getting educated by the film Unacknowledged. We're going to do another full feature film that's going to be on the deeper transdimensional sciences and the higher states of consciousness and the CE5 initiative, and why contact can be actuated through non-locality and consciousness and coherent thought, and what the physics is behind this of non-locality, and what the science is behind it, but also what the evidence behind it, because ultimately the ultimate disclosure event is to have millions of people doing that with events unfolding, and there is not a goddamn thing that the intelligence community can do if there are enough people doing it. Now, they can do things around what I'm doing because I don't step out of my house and go anywhere without being, fully penetrated. I mean, one time I turned all my electronics off and went to the beach with my grandkids and daughters, and, after the phone was off for a couple of days, they sent a special forces team down the beach to get eyeballs on me and report back in, and my grandson and I saw it. So, I mean, I'm in a situation where, the life I had ended some years ago, but most of the people out there have the freedom to do things, because while this group is large and they have great monitoring, they don't have assets to disrupt everyone everywhere. So this is where there has to be a mass movement for contact, a mass movement for disclosure. And the other thing people really ought to do is if you show people the book Unacknowledged, or give that to people, like a club like yours can just buy them for whatever half off in bulk from our store, or get them to see Unacknowledged on Netflix or wherever. If they don't have Netflix, they can see it on iTunes or Vimeo, PlayStation, wherever it is. But what you'll do is get people focused on the information and then move them along, and bring them deeper and deeper into an understanding. One of the problems I've found with people is that they will try to force people to drink from a fire hose. Or, they're saying there'll be too much information, TMI. And they'll try to, instead of taking someone stepwise through the information, they will try to bring in everything all at once and go off into the weeds on things that, even if they're true, seem unbelievable. And so, there's a wonderful saying from the ancient Persian. I think it goes something to the effect of, the wise are they who speak not until they have a hearer, someone who can actually hear you. So there's no point speaking past people. So one of the passion of being a teacher or an educator or someone trying to get this information out to people is to really listen to what they're ready to hear and then give them information commensurate with what they're ready to absorb and move them a little bit further. And then when they ask the next question, it's a very Socratic method. People who come with me for these week-long expeditions under the stars, that's how I run the entire week. It goes just as far as people's are ready to ask the question for. Because otherwise, it just goes right past people. And there's no point, and you might as well be talking to a potted palm if the person you've left them behind because you're going into things that they don't have a foundation to understand yet. It's sort of like teaching someone in kindergarten who's learning 1 and 1 is 2, advanced calculus or quantitative analysis. You can't do that. So I think that part of this is having the compassion to understand that you have to approach people from where they are, not where you want them to be. And that's, of course, something that is a big challenge to me every single day and every radio and TV interview I'm on. And I was recently with Jesse Ventura on his, and people said, I love that interview. I didn't feel I said anything in that interview. But Jesse loved it. I could talk to you all day, but I didn't go too far. I answered the questions and shared what, was commensurate with his questions and that format. And then you could go further and deeper and further and deeper. And I think this is what we all need to, I'm trying to model this for other people to learn to do it.
Well, what you're saying is true, and rest assured. In fact, we have a program coming up in the spring that's going to address exactly what you just said, of how to talk to people about these important subjects and get those major points across. We're going to have a whole program just on that subject. So right on the money on that. Dr. Greer, this
Great. Good for you.
The quickest 90 minutes, oh my goodness, it has. And Dr. Greer, on behalf of the members and friends of Disclosure Network New York, thank you for your time today. We fully support
you're welcome.
Your important work and stand ready to help. Our very best wishes to you and continued successes.
Thank you. Hey, set up a big event in New York and build it and they will come. And hook up with Sandy Rower. Sandy is it's called her Art Foundation, the founder, Alexander Calder, and he is up there. And we need to organize something that's at the UN or something that has, 1,000, 2,000 people or something. That could be, a screening of Unacknowledged maybe and a Q&A or some kind of presentation. I get everywhere, it seems, with New York, but, it's something really well thought. I don't go up to New York to meet with, 40 people. Unfortunately, at this point in time, constraints are such that it needs to be up in the 2,000.
One of our members has been instrumental in getting Steve Bassett to talk in the late spring at the UN. And, that's just one of our members working her miracles to make disclosure happen. There's other irons in the fire, which I'll email you about, but we're doing that. And just know that we really are very much on track on this.
Great. Good work. Well, okay, be in touch, and all of you have a wonderful day. Stay warm, and hope that I can see you guys sometime up there.
Much love to you and to M.
All right. Thanks so much.
Oh my God. Thank you guys for being so patient. M, by the way, M is Emily, his wife. That's when I said love to him. I want to do a photograph. Is anybody here, if you don't want to be in the photograph, just come over here, because I'm going to take, we're going to